Hello and welcome to Learn, Do, Become Radio. My name is Alia and I'm excited today to record a podcast all about routines and segmenting them into our must-do routines and then routines that would be nice to do or that might be a little bit more optional. And here at Learn, Do, Become, we help people who are overwhelmed by the details of life to create a simple system so they can do what matters most. And part of that system that we teach about is really focused on projects, routines, and tasks, and learning how those are all different from one another and how we incorporate each of those three things into our daily schedules and how we're able to move forward on projects that mean a lot to us and maintain those routines that are important that I'll be talking more about today. And then also finding time to complete those one-off tasks. So if that is something that you haven't heard about before or you're interested in learning a lot more about, we have our signature STEP program, and STEP stands for Steps to Everyday Productivity. And you can find more details all about that at learndobecome.com/STEP program. Or if you want to watch our free webinar, How to Finally Stop Drowning in Piles, you can find details about that at learndobecome.com/STEP. All right, now into the podcast. I have really been thinking a lot about this topic of must-do routines versus optional routines because we just recently had our second baby and our lives are looking very different than they were a couple weeks ago. We have a lot less sleep, obviously, and we also have a toddler, so our time and energy is not able to go to the same things that I went to a couple weeks ago, and that's totally understandable. But I think being able to segment our personal and family routines into those must-do routines, and then also having a list of routines that we would love to do, but if we're not able to get to them because of our life circumstances right now, we're not going to beat ourselves up. We're not going to be frustrated. We're just going to recognize that this is our season of life and that we can incorporate as many routines as we can, but also we need to give ourselves grace and recognize that there's just not as much time in the day as there was to do routines. And this is why I want to share this topic with you, because whether or not you have young children or if you're dealing with some health challenges that's limiting your energy and your available time to work on routines, or if you're moving or starting a new job or anything that's kind of a big life change, or even if you're kind of going through the regular everyday motions of life, but there's just some, people that need extra love or attention, or a circumstance that comes up at work or in family that's really difficult and needs more of your focus. I think this is something that we can all relate to no matter what stage of life we're currently in. And I first learned about this idea of these routines that are either must-do or optional from my parents and something that they call the multiple choice perfect day. And I'll link to the podcast that they did about this because when I heard about that idea, I just loved the way that they talked about how every day can be our perfect day, even if we don't get to every single thing on our list. Obviously, we need to look at our priorities and look at things that are urgent or appointments or things that have to happen. But when we can write out a list of all the things that we'd like to do that day, whether it's all the routines we have or some optional tasks that we want to fit into our day, when we look at all the things that we would like to do that aren't necessarily urgent or aren't necessarily things that need to happen, we can pick a couple of those that align with our available energy and our time, and then that allows every day to be perfect. Because sure, it would be nice to have, 8 dedicated hours to do lots of routines and work on different tasks and projects, but we obviously know that's not the case. But I love that this idea of the multiple choice perfect day exists, where we can give ourselves an outline of all those routines that we would love to do, and then we just pick a few of them that work best in our day and incorporate them as best we can. And then we end the day feeling really encouraged and confident and happy instead of feeling down and discouraged. So I'll link the Multiple Choice Perfect Day podcast on the show notes, and you can find all of our past show notes, including this one, at learndobecome.com/radio. And we have all of our podcasts linked there and all the show notes. So if you want to read a little written version of this podcast or skim anything or share it with a friend, that's a great place to go. So at Learn to Become, we encourage everyone to write down a list of their routines. It's called the routines list, pretty self-explanatory. And we invite people to segment this list into daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, And then they start writing down their routines in each of those sections. What do you do on a daily basis? What do you do on a quarterly basis, a yearly basis? And some people might have more custom categories, like if you have a semi-annual routine, or I have a few work routines that I do 3 times a week. So I have a little section for routines that I do 3 times a week. So you might need to modify this a little bit based on your personal needs and your personal routines. But I really like that it's segmented this way by daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. And then what I do is take it even a step further, and inside each of those categories of daily routines, for example, at the top of my daily routines list, I'll write down things that must happen to keep life moving along, things that are my non-negotiables, and then I'll write down a bunch of other things that I'd like to have happen on a daily basis, but they might not necessarily be things that I can do every single day, and it might be things that happen, I maybe do them every, once a week, or I might be able to incorporate 1 or 2 of them into my day. But I love having my routines list segmented by my must-do routines and then my would-be nice to do routines. And I'll give some examples of these sections. So for example, some of my must-do routines that are non-negotiables are things like we need to grocery shop once a week. That's a weekly routine that has to happen. Whether it's a bigger grocery shopping day or smaller, doesn't matter. We just need to have some fresh fruits and vegetables especially, and then a couple of those, basics that we run out of during the week. Another thing is paying bills. I don't have many bills on auto pay just because I like to check in and make sure that what we're paying matches our budget. So underneath my monthly category, I have a few different bills that we pay manually that need to happen every single month on a certain day. And I also have calendar reminders attached to each of those routines. So on my calendar for the first of the month, for example, that's when we pay our rent for our apartment. And then I have it on my routines list as a must-do routine. But then I also have it on my calendar as a task on my Google Calendar app. And I have it set to be an all-day task, which means on the first of the month, I see a task pinned to the top of my day, and that's something that I need to accomplish that day. So I like to incorporate my calendar reminders into some of these must-do routines, so that way they actually happen when we say they need to happen. In my weekly routines, my husband and I are in charge of the music program for the kids at church. So every Sunday night, we do a planning session to plan the different lesson or the different songs that we're going to focus on that week with the kids. So we have in our calendar a little time blocked off for Sunday evening to plan for the next Sunday singing time for the kids. And then that's also written down on my routines list under my weekly section. And that's a must do because people are depending on us to plan singing time and show up and have some kind of lesson or activity provided for the kids. And if we don't have that penciled into our calendar, it's not going to happen. We also have things such as laundry that needs to happen every week. And I don't have a specific day for that. That's more of a flexible, like anytime it needs to happen during the week. But obviously we're doing laundry at least once a week, usually more with having little kids. And then in my semi-annual routines, I have things like renewing our car insurance and making sure I print the new documents and put them into our car, and that we also make sure the payment goes through. So that's kind of all in one routine, and I make sure I have calendar reminders for those things as well. So you kind of get the picture, right? There's a couple routines in life that have to happen. We have to pay our bills. We have to have food. We have to have clean clothes. We have to plan and make sure that our commitments are completed and done. Like, for example, our singing time, or I also have some work routines that obviously have to be done. Like I help send out our weekly newsletter. I help track the different metrics and our statistics for the business, how things are looking. So I do keep my personal routines and my work routines separate, but there are a lot of routines that have to happen on a consistent basis. And if they don't happen, then I'll be letting down my family, myself, the community people that I work with, and also learn to become and the work responsibilities that I have. And when I look at the amount of must-do routines I have, I don't feel stressed about it because there's actually a very manageable amount. For my work routines, the must-do routines, there's about 2 or 3 that pop up on my digital task manager every single day. They're not always the exact same, they kind of fluctuate, but I maybe have 2 to 3 must-do routines for work every day. And then I'm able to work more flexibly and answer emails, do projects and things like that in the other time that I'm spending working. In my home and family life, I have a couple daily routines that I try to stick to, like exercising, obviously, and getting ready for the day. But then things like laundry, that's just once a week. Things like shopping, that's once a week. I don't have a ton on my plate that I have to do every single day because I have my routine segmented by the must-dos and then the would-be-nice-to-do routines. So now getting into the would-be-nice-to-do routines. These are things that I would love to do all the time, but I'm not going to be frustrated with myself, or I'm not going to be making myself work extra hard when I'm really tired. Things like cleaning different parts of our apartment. This is something where obviously we try to keep a really nice and tidy apartment, but things like vacuuming and cleaning the bathroom and doing more of those deep cleaning types of tasks, those are things that I'm not really going to stress about because I obviously, if it needs to be done urgently, if something spills or if something's really messy, we'll obviously incorporate that into our day and make sure that happens. But things like cleaning the bathroom, that's on my list as something I would love to do twice a month, but sometimes it doesn't happen twice a month. I sometimes have to push that task a little bit farther, and then the floors do get a little dusty, or the mirror has some splotches on it from, toothpaste or whatever, but we generally try to keep it really clean. But with things like cleaning the bathroom, or mopping, or washing our cars, or vacuuming, things like that, I put them on my routines list in the right category, whether it's weekly, whether we wash our cars quarterly. We just kind of have that be more flexible because I know that there's going to be some days where I'm not going to have a lot of energy. And if I see 10 cleaning tasks on my routines list that I have to do that day, I'm going to feel stressed and overwhelmed if I have a lot going on or if we didn't sleep well that night, all those different factors combined. So I really encourage you to take a look at what's on your routines list right now and figure out what are my essentials, what needs to happen, and then what things are more flexible. And then as I'm doing my weekly review, this is something we encourage everyone to do once a week. They can pick whatever day and time works best for them. I like to do my weekly reviews on the weekends when I do some planning with my husband in preparation for the next week. But as I'm doing my weekly review, this gives me a chance to say, I'm going to check in with my routines list and see if anything is being neglected or if anything needs to have my attention brought back to it. And usually we're doing pretty good. We're hitting most of our routines. But if I look at my routines list in my weekly or monthly section, and if I say, in my nice to do routines or my somewhat optional routines, we actually haven't mopped our floor in a couple weeks or over a month, it might be good to do that just to keep it all clean. I might actually schedule time in our calendar for when a good time would be to mop the floors because it's a routine that's getting forgotten about or it's not getting done on a regular basis. So when routines aren't getting done, that's when I say, okay, this might be time to put it on the calendar and make sure that I'm really checking in. But otherwise, most of the routines, as they're flexible, they get done, as appropriate when they need to, but it's not on a very rigid timeline. So I just wanted to share that encouragement for anyone who's going through a lot right now, or even if you're thinking, well, life is going pretty normal, but I don't always know how my energy is going to be, or I don't know if something's going to pop up with family or work or otherwise with friends, things like that. Having your routines list segmented this way takes so much off of your plate, but it allows you to know that everything is safely on your routines list and that you're going to check in on it during your weekly review, or maybe you have a calendar reminder to check in every 2 weeks on your routines list, or at the start of the month. That's maybe when you look at your routines list and say, okay, it's the start of July, for example. What routines have to happen every July, and how can I make sure I incorporate all of them into my calendar, or maybe they could be more flexible depending on the routine. So I encourage you to look at your routines list, and if you haven't made one yet, that this might be a fun time to start making it. And as one of our team members, Taryn, always says, follow yourself around for the day, follow yourself around for the week, and figure out what your routines are if you've never written them down before, or if you've never really specified them. Follow yourself around and take note of the things that you are doing on a routine basis, and then that will help you to make it happen and incorporate them into your life. So thanks so much for joining today's podcast. And if you want to share any examples of your essential routines or things that you've found that were originally in your routines list that felt like essentials, but actually could be more flexible and could be incorporated on a less rigid or strict basis, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave them in the comment section. We also have a free Facebook group that everyone's welcome to join. You can find that at learndodobecome.com/FB family. So Facebook family. So that's a fun place where people can share things they've learned on the podcast or things that they've learned by going through our programs. So we encourage you to get that routines list created if you haven't already, or figure out how you can make your routines list more optimal and fit better into your life no matter what's going on. So hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time at Learn, Do, Become Radio.